There are places in this world where GPS stops working, where your phone shows full signal, but calls won't connect, where trees grow so dense that even at noon it's dark as midnight. Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming is one of those places. Since 1950, 47 people have officially gone missing there. Unofficially, more. Much more. This is the story of 3 friends. 2 of them walked out of that forest. 1 did not. Daniel, Marcus, and Connor had known each other since college. Every year, they took a week off and went somewhere without people. This time, they chose Shoshone. 3 days of hiking. Tents, campfire, complete disconnection from civilization. Daniel found the trail online. The reviews were good. Nothing suspicious. The first day was perfect. They walked the trail, laughed, photographed the scenery. The forest was beautiful in that strange way that something vast and indifferent to you can be beautiful. The trees, cedars and firs, stood like columns of some ancient temple. A light fog drifted between them even at noon. By evening, they reached their planned campsite by a small river. They set up tents, built a fire. Connor pulled out whiskey. Everything was fine. Too fine. In the middle of the night, Daniel woke up with a strange feeling. Not from a sound, not from movement, just a feeling that something was wrong. He stepped out of his tent and looked around. The fire had burned down. Marcus was asleep in his tent. His steady breathing was audible. Connor's tent was open. Daniel figured he had just gone to the bathroom. He lay back down. Fell asleep. In the morning, Connor was gone. At first, they didn't panic. Connor might have gone to watch the sunrise. He might have wandered far and couldn't hear them. They called his name. The forest swallowed the sound like cotton. The shout flew between the trees and disappeared without echo. After an hour, the realization settled in. Connor was gone. Daniel pulled out his phone. 0 signal bars. Marcus tried his. The same. They were in a dead zone. That part of the forest where radio waves simply don't penetrate through the density of trees and the surrounding mountain terrain. They decided to search on their own. 3 hours walking circles around the camp, expanding the search radius. They found a track, the sole of Connor's boot in the wet ground, near a small stream. The track led deeper into the forest, in the opposite direction from the trail, towards somewhere no one would go voluntarily. There was no path there. There was nothing there. They followed the track. A kilometer in the tracks vanished. Just vanished. As if Connor had lifted into the air right in the middle of the forest. Around them was silence. Even the birds had stopped singing. Daniel would later say that was the first moment he felt real fear. Not anxiety. Not worry. A cold animal terror that rises from the stomach and closes around the throat. They stood in the middle of the forest. Their friend was gone. No signal. Getting dark. They decided to return to camp and walk out at dawn to get help. It was the smart decision, the only right decision. But then Marcus saw the light. Somewhere far between the trees, maybe 3 kilometers, maybe 4, an orange light flickered. A campfire. A large campfire. Too large for one camp. "Connor," said Marcus. "That doesn't look like one person," Daniel replied. "But he could have found other hikers. He could have asked for help." They stared at that light for a long minute. Then they walked toward it. Not because he was smart, but because when your friend has vanished in a dark forest and you see a fire, your feet carry you there on their own. They walked in silence. The forest around them grew darker, if that was possible. The trees stood closer together, branches grabbed in their clothes, dry leaves crunched underfoot, too loudly for their liking. Daniel turned off his flashlight as they got closer, instinctively. He couldn't explain why. And then they saw them. The clearing was large, maybe 70 meters across. In the center burned an enormous fire, a column of flame 5 meters high. Around it stood people. Daniel counted later. Around 50. Maybe more. They stood in a circle holding torches. They wore identical clothing, dark robes to the ground, with hoods pulled low. Faces covered. They were not speaking. They were swaying. All together. In one rhythm. And they produced a low, monotonous sound. Not singing and not prayer. Something between the two. Something that made your teeth ache and made you want to cover your ears. In the center of the circle between the fire and the people stood a post. Wooden, roughly made. Tied to it was a man. Connor. Daniel recognized his jacket. The blue jacket Connor had bought specifically for this trip. Connor hung on the post unconscious. His head dropped to his chest. Whether he was alive? From that distance, it was impossible to tell. Marcus grabbed Daniel's hand and squeezed so hard he nearly cried out. They sat down on the ground behind the bushes and watched. The ritual continued. The robed figures swayed and hummed. 2 of them approached Connor. Did something. Daniel couldn't see clearly from that distance, but Connor lifted his head. Alive then. That was the only thought cycling through Daniel's mind. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive. We have to do something, Daniel whispered. There are 2 of us, Marcus answered without taking his eyes off the clearing. There are 50 of them. No signal. No weapons. In the middle of a forest. Daniel knew Marcus was right. He knew it logically and rationally. But watching what was happening in that clearing and not moving, that was one of the hardest things he had ever done. The ritual grew more intense. The sound grew louder. The fire burned brighter. The figures moved faster. Daniel looked away. Marcus kept watching. Watching and unable to stop, as if hypnotized. Then Marcus closed his eyes and looked away too. There's nothing we can do, he said quietly. His voice was shaking. They sat in the bushes and waited, not knowing what they were waiting for, not knowing what would happen next. Time stopped, or stretched. Daniel couldn't say afterward how long they sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. And then something in the clearing changed. The sound shifted in pitch. The figure stopped moving. Silence fell suddenly and completely, as if someone had switched off the audio in the room. And in that silence, Daniel saw something that made his body act faster than his mind. He screamed. The sound tore out of him involuntarily. Not a word and not a name, just a scream. Pure animal terror that cannot be held back. Marcus instantly grabbed him and pressed him to the ground, covering his mouth with his palm. But it was too late. In the clearing, every hooded figure simultaneously turned their heads in their direction. 50 hoods, in one instant, in one direction, like a single organism. Run, Marcus whispered. They ran. Daniel didn't remember the escape in detail. He remembered darkness and branches cutting his face. He remembered the sound of his own breathing, loud and ragged. He remembered falling several times and getting up without feeling the pain. Adrenaline doing its work. No one chased them. Or they were chased silently, which would have been worse. They ran until dawn. At dawn, they came out onto a road, an ordinary Forest Service road that rangers drove. Marcus stopped and dropped to his knees right on the asphalt. Daniel stood and shook. The first vehicle appeared 20 minutes later. They threw themselves into the road and stopped it. Rangers and police combed that section of forest the next day. They found the clearing. They found the remains of a large fire. They found the post. They didn't find Connor. Not that day. Not a week later. Not a month later. 1 year after these events, Daniel gave an interview to a podcast. They asked him what he saw in the clearing in the moment he screamed. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I saw what they were doing to Connor, and I saw that Connor was looking at me. Through all of that horror and all of that pain, he was looking directly at me, and I did nothing. That's not the scariest thing. The scariest thing is that I walked out alive." The case was officially closed as a disappearance under unexplained circumstances. The clearing was never found again. Some stories are buried. Some are waiting to be found. If you want to open more files from the Moorvane archives, leave a like and write a comment. The next case may already be waiting.